On the island of Barbados, where the Atlantic winds sweep across sugarcane fields and the nights cling heavy with salt and silence, there stands a cemetery in Oistins, one that holds more questions than corpses. And inside that cemetery lies a vault, not just any vault, but one carved of solid coral stone, sealed with slabs of marble so heavy it took 6 men to move them, a place that should have been a quiet, eternal resting ground. But in the early 1700s, the Chase Vault became a chamber of horrors, because whenever its stone doors were opened, the coffins inside had shifted, not gently, not slightly, but violently thrown about, as if some unseen hand had lifted and hurled them into chaos. This was not once, this was not twice, this happened again and again under the watch of governors, priests, masons, and ordinary villagers. And to this day, no one has been able to explain why. Before we step deeper into this haunting case, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from tonight? And if mysteries like this keep you awake, subscribe to Cold Mysteries so you never miss the stories history tried to bury. Our story begins in 1807 when a woman named Thomasina Goddard was laid to rest in the vault, a simple wooden coffin placed inside the cool stone chamber. Nothing unusual. Nothing disturbed, but just a year later, in 1808, the Chase family acquired the vault. And when the workers returned to open it, they froze. Thomasina's coffin was no longer where it had been placed. It had shifted. Some said it looked as if it had been lifted upright, then slammed down. Others claimed it was shoved against the wall, wedged at an angle impossible to achieve naturally. There were no signs of entry. No evidence of digging. The thick marble slab at the entrance had not been moved, and yet the coffin had. The workers were unsettled. The priest offered a quick blessing, but unease lingered. Barbados was a land already thick with superstition. The enslaved Africans whispered of obeah curses, island spirits restless in their graves. The Europeans muttered of demons, of gods, punishment, of the devil walking among them. For now, though, the vault was resealed. Thomasina's coffin remained where it had fallen, and the people of Christchurch Parish tried to forget. But forgetting would not be allowed. In the years that followed, the Chase family themselves would begin to die. A tragedy of daughters and sons buried far too young. And each time the vault was opened, the scene inside grew stranger. What began with one coffin shifting would soon become coffins hurled like toys, heavy lead boxes overturned as if weight meant nothing. But here's the question that terrified the island: who or what was moving them? By the time Barbados's governor himself came to witness, the vault, the mystery, had crossed from local whispers into official history. And yet the deeper they looked, the less sense it made. So join me as we walk together through the locked doors of the Chase Vault, a place where the dead refused to lie still, and where silence was broken not by the living but by something else entirely. Death in the tropics comes swiftly. The heat, the humidity, the fevers carried by insects, all of these haunted Barbados in the 18th and 19th centuries. And for the Chase family, death seemed almost drawn to their name. In 1808, Samuel Chase's infant daughter was laid to rest in the family vault, a small coffin dwarfed by the heavy marble walls that would become her prison. But the grief would not stop there. In July of 1812, another coffin arrived. Dorcas Chase, just 12 years old, had withered away. Some claimed she suffered abuse at the hands of her father, known for his cruelty and rage. Others whispered that she had taken her own life, a sin so great in the eyes of the church that burial in sacred ground should have been forbidden. Yet her coffin was carried into the Chase Vault and placed carefully beside the others. And when the vault was sealed again, the villagers hoped the darkness would finally settle. It did not. A month later, the vault was opened again for yet another burial. Thomas Chase himself, the patriarch, had died. His coffin was massive, made of solid lead, weighing nearly 700 pounds. It took 8 men straining and sweating to wrestle it inside, but when they opened the vault to place it, the mourners fell silent. The smaller coffins inside were no longer at rest. Dorcas's coffin had been flung violently against the opposite wall. Thomasina Goddard's coffin too had shifted from its corner. Both lay at angles that defied natural explanation. The men grunted as they dragged them back into order, and whispers spread quickly among the crowd. The vault had been sealed, the slab at the entrance undisturbed, and yet the dead had moved. Some villagers refused to help carry the heavy lead coffin of Thomas Chase. The horses pulling the hearse panicked violently near the cemetery gates, kicking and screaming as though smelling something that the human eye could not see. And as the new coffin was forced inside, the priest's blessing faltered. His voice shook, for he too could see what all of Barbados now knew. Something was not right within the Chase vault. Was it grief that made the villagers see shadows where there were none? Or was it something darker? Barbados was a land of divided belief. Anglican priests preached of Christ and salvation, while enslaved Africans, brought in chains, whispered of Obeah and spirits older than the church itself. And now even the Europeans began to wonder, was the Chase family cursed? Was Dorcas's troubled soul restless in the afterlife, shaking the coffins in rage? Or had the devil himself claimed a home in the tomb? Whatever the cause, fear began to spread. The people of Christ Church Parish avoided the cemetery. Servants refused to approach the vault, even in daylight. Mothers warned their children never to speak the Chase name aloud. But death continued its march, and with each new burial, the mystery would grow more violent, more undeniable, until the very governor of Barbados himself would be forced to intervene. What began with a single coffin shifting had now turned into a vault of chaos. And the people of Barbados asked themselves a question no one dared answer aloud. If the dead could not be contained by stone and lead, what force was moving them in the dark? By now the whispers had become more than superstition. The Chase vault was no longer just a tomb. It was a spectacle of fear. And every time its massive marble slab was pried open, more eyes came to watch. At first, the villagers believed it might have been pranksters. Mischief in the night, perhaps thieves or vandals. But the more times the vault was opened, the less sense it made. For no lock had been broken, no mark left on the cement that sealed the door, no sign that anyone, living at least, had entered. In 1816, when another child of the Chase family was buried, the scene inside stunned even the most skeptical. All of the coffins, every single one, had been displaced. Dorcas's was shoved against the far wall. Thomasina's wooden coffin was splintered, and the great lead coffin of Thomas Chase, a box that weighed more than 6 men could lift, had been hurled to the opposite side of the chamber as though it were a feather. The men struggled to move it back, sweating in terror more than labor. They grunted under the impossible weight, whispering to themselves prayers they hadn't spoken since childhood. Priests were called. Stone masons were summoned. Each entered with trembling steps. Some swore they heard a sound, the faint scrape of something heavy dragging in the dark, long after the coffins had been reset. Others claimed to feel the air grow thicker inside, the vault, the choking, suffocating heat that made their vision blur. And then there were the animals. Horses that refused to approach the cemetery gates, dogs that howled through the night when the vault was opened. In the small island village, this became more than gossip. It became a terror that reached every household. By 1817, the Chase vault had become infamous. Whenever the slab was lifted, crowds gathered, men, women, even children, just to witness what horrors might be revealed inside. Each time, the scene grew stranger. Coffins flipped, lids cracked, corners shattered, and always the same conclusion. There was no sign of intrusion, no flooding, no earthquake, no tremor that could explain the violence inside. Even the skeptics, men who laughed at spirits and curses, found their words faltering when faced with the sheer weight of the evidence. The truth was worse than anything they had imagined, because this was not a haunting in the shadows of a bedroom, nor whispers on the wind at night. This was a defiance of nature, documented by dozens, witnessed in daylight. It was not just that the dead had moved, it was that they refused to stay still. And each time the vault was resealed, the fear grew heavier. The villagers began to speak less of who moved the coffins, and more of what would happen next. By now, the church could no longer ignore it. The parish priests had prayed, they had blessed, they had sprinkled holy water, all to no effect. And as the rumors spread beyond Barbados, reaching colonial officials and merchants, the problem of the Chase Vault became too big for whispers. It would soon attract the attention of the one man whose authority could not be ignored, the governor of Barbados himself, Lord Combermere. But before he arrived, the vault had one more lesson to teach, that even stone, lead, and prayer could not contain what lay restless within. The people of Barbados now lived with a terrible certainty. Every time the Chase Vault was opened, they would face chaos. And the question was no longer whether the coffins would move, but how violently. By 1817, the Chase Vault was no longer just a family tomb. It had become an obsession for the people of Barbados, a living puzzle that mocked both reason and faith. And when no solution could be found inside the stone walls, the people began to search outside them. In taverns, churches, plantations, and slave quarters, the theories multiplied. For the enslaved Africans of the island, the answer seemed clear. They spoke of Obeah, the West Indian spiritual practice feared by Europeans, yet deeply rooted in Africa's traditions. They said the Chase family was cursed, that Dorcas's tragic death had opened a door between worlds, and that restless spirits had been called to the vault by anger, betrayal, or blood spilled unjustly. To the overseers and plantation owners, these whispers were terrifying, not only because of what they suggested, but because of who spoke them. The enslaved had long been punished for practicing Obeah, yet here was evidence, undeniable physical evidence, that their warnings held weight. The Europeans laughed nervously in daylight, but at night they avoided the vault just the same. The Anglican priests, desperate to calm their congregations, offered their own answer. The devil. They preached from pulpits that the Chase Vault had become a playground for demonic forces. That Dorcas, rumored to have taken her own life, had cursed the family line, that God had withdrawn his protection from this tomb of sin. But their sermons were unconvincing. For if God had abandoned the Chase Vault, what might that mean for the rest of them? Others tried to remain rational. Some suggested the coffins had shifted because of earthquakes. Barbados, after all, sat on the edge of a tectonic plate, and tremors were not unknown. But if earthquakes had shaken the vault, why had no other graves in the cemetery been disturbed? Why had the heavy marble slab at the entrance not shifted, even slightly? Another theory was flooding, that water had seeped into the vault, causing the coffins to float and drift. But when masons inspected the chamber, they found no standing water. And besides, how could solid lead coffins, weighing hundreds of pounds, float like driftwood on a tide that did not exist? Then came the theory of gases, that trapped air, expanding in the tropical heat, had pushed the coffins out of place. But no scientist could explain how air alone could toss lead boxes around like children's toys. And so the theories grew wilder. Some said the coffins moved because of vibrations from carriages and carts along the road. Others claimed invisible hands of the enslaved dead, rising in rebellion, shook the vault from below. The truth was simpler and more terrifying. No theory satisfied. None could explain the violence, the precision, the repeated defiance of natural law. And so the people of Christchurch Parish stopped asking why. They began asking when. When would the vault open again? When would the coffins move next? And when would the restless dead finally leave the vault altogether? The mystery had escaped the graveyard walls. It was spoken of in Bridgetown, in London, even in letters across the Atlantic. Barbados had become infamous not for its sugar or its trade, but for its vault that could not keep the dead still. And it was this spreading dread that reached the ears of Charles W. Paget, Lord Combermere, the governor of the island, a military man, a skeptic, a rationalist. If anyone could bring order to the chaos of the Chase Vault, it would be him. But what he found inside would only deepen the mystery. In an age of slavery, superstition, and science struggling for answers, the Chase Vault became the one place where no explanation could survive. And soon, the eyes of the entire colony would turn to a single night when the governor himself ordered the vault unsealed. By 1819, the Chase Vault had become more than an island curiosity. It was a scandal, an embarrassment to church, colony, and crown. The dead refused to rest, and no priest, no mason, no family member could explain why. The governor of Barbados, Lord Combermere, a decorated British officer, finally decided the time for superstition was over. If the vault was cursed, he would expose it. If it was a fraud, he would punish it. And if it was something darker still, he would at least see it with his own eyes. Combermere summoned witnesses, officials, clergy, masons, soldiers. This would not be rumor, this would be testimony. When the marble slab was pried open that morning, every eye strained to see. Once again, the coffins had been hurled about. The massive lead box of Thomas Chase, hundreds of pounds in weight, lay wedged against the wall. The smaller coffins were overturned, cracked, split. The governor stepped inside himself, his polished boots grinding against the dusty stone. He inspected every corner. No cracks in the walls, no flooding on the floor, no tunnels dug beneath, nothing. The coffins were reset, the vault was cleared. And then Combermere gave his order, seal it tighter than ever before. Workers mixed fresh cement to close the entrance, pressing the marble slab into place until not even a finger's width of space remained. To prevent tampering, the governor commanded a thick layer of sand to be spread across the stone floor of the vault, so that if anyone entered, footprints would betray them. Finally, soldiers were stationed nearby. Day and night, the cemetery would be watched. No one would slip past unnoticed. The trap had been set. For months, the vault remained undisturbed. The villagers whispered, waiting, their eyes fixed on the churchyard. Some believed the precautions would finally silence the mystery. Others feared the governor had made a grave mistake, that sealing the vault so tightly would only provoke whatever forces stirred within. And so the vault stood, silent, heavy, watching, until the time came when death returned once more. In 1819, the body of Samuel Brewster, a respected member of the parish, was to be interred in the Chase Vault. The crowd that gathered was larger than ever before. They were not there to mourn, they were there to see. The cement was chipped away, the marble slab dragged from its place. Soldiers held back the crowd as the vault yawned open once more. And when the governor stepped inside, the air seemed to grow heavy. Silent, almost waiting. What he found there would leave him pale, shaken, and speechless. The sand on the floor was untouched, no footprints, no marks, no cracks in the walls, no water seeping in. And yet, once again, the coffins lay in chaos, thrown, overturned, smashed against the walls like playthings. Even the massive lead coffin of Thomas Chase had been tossed, impossibly, across the chamber. The vault was empty of intruders, empty of life, and yet alive with a violence no man could explain. The people of Barbados now had their proof. Under the eye of the governor himself, the coffins had moved again, and from this day forward, the Chase Vault would pass from rumor into history. A mystery recorded not by frightened villagers, but by the most powerful man on the island. What he saw would never leave him. Far 19. The day had come. Under the watch of the governor, the clergy, the soldiers, and a crowd that filled the cemetery gates, the chase vault was opened once again. This time there could be no excuses, no stories of vandals in the night, no whispers of careless servants. The vault had been sealed with cement. Sand covered the floor. Soldiers had watched the grounds without pause. And yet, what they saw inside chilled even the most rational men to silence. The coffins lay in violent disorder. Dorcas's coffin was flung against the far wall, splintered and cracked. Thomasina's wooden coffin, already weakened, was smashed to pieces, her bones spilling from broken planks. But it was Thomas Chase's coffin that defied belief. That massive leaden box, nearly 700 pounds of solid weight, had been tossed across the chamber like a child's toy. It leaned at an impossible angle against the stone, balanced precariously as though hurled by hands far stronger than human. And on the dusty floor, the sand that had been spread so carefully to catch intruders, there was nothing. No footprints, no drag marks, no sign that any living being had entered. Governor Combermere himself turned pale. A man of war, hardened by battlefields, he was unprepared for what he saw in that tomb. The priests crossed themselves furiously, muttering prayers that barely reached their lips. Soldiers shifted uneasily, their boots grinding in the gravel, as though standing still too long might invite whatever force lurked inside. One witness later wrote that the silence in that moment was so complete he could hear the ragged breathing of every man in the vault. Another claimed that a faint sound echoed, a scrape like stone against stone, though no one moved. The governor gave no explanation. He simply ordered the coffins returned to their places, though even that task took twice as long as expected. Strong men struggled to heave Thomas Chase's coffin back into line, trembling with effort and dread alike. Imagine it. 6 men groaning under the weight of a coffin that had somehow hurled itself across the vault without leaving a single mark on the sand. What power could do such a thing? The governor's silence gave the answer none dared speak aloud. No earthly power at all. In the days that followed, Combermere issued no official proclamation, no explanation to the people. But his actions spoke louder than words. He ordered the coffins removed. Each was carried away and reburied in separate graves across the cemetery, where the ground was soft and the spirits, it was hoped, would rest more peacefully. The Chase vault itself was left empty. Its stone walls remained, but no coffin ever entered again. The marble slab was lowered for the last time, not as a seal, but as a door forever closed. Barbados fell into fearful silence. The villagers spoke of demons chained within the earth. The priests warned of God's punishment upon sinners. The enslaved whispered of restless spirits who would not be bound by stone. And though the vault stood untouched, the stories grew. Some swore they heard knocking from within when they passed by at night. Others claimed shadows pooled at its door like smoke. The truth was buried with the coffins, and the Chase vault became less a tomb and more a legend. The investigation had been meant to silence the mystery. Instead, it confirmed it. For under the eyes of the highest authority in Barbados, the coffins had moved again. And from that day, the Chase vault would no longer be remembered as a family tomb. It would be remembered as the place where the dead refused to stay dead. The governor had hoped his presence would end the rumors, that by observing the vault himself, he would quiet the island's whispers with reason and authority. Instead, he made them worse. Because if even Governor Combermere, with his soldiers, his cement, his sand, and his skeptical eyes, could not stop the coffins from moving, then who could? The story spread like wildfire. In Bridgetown, merchants spoke of it over rum and sugar contracts. In parish churches, priests trembled when their congregations asked for answers. On the plantations, enslaved men and women whispered that the restless spirits of their ancestors had risen in rebellion against the white masters. Every version of the tale carried one truth: the dead were not still, and the people of Barbados began to avoid Christchurch Cemetery altogether. By day, mothers hurried their children past its gates. By night, no sane man dared walk the road that led by the chase vault. Even the horses, it was said, would grow restless, pulling their reins away from the burial ground. When the coffins were removed and the vault left empty, no family, not even the poorest, dared to claim it again. The chase vault stood abandoned, its marble slab a silent reminder of what had taken place. Other vaults in the cemetery were used, other burials took place, but the chase vault remained a hollow shell, avoided like a plague house, and slowly its presence turned from scandal into legend. Beyond Barbados, the story travelled across the seas. Letters carried the account to England, where Londoners whispered about the cursed island vault. Sailors brought it to ports in Boston and New York, where it became tavern talk late into the night. Some told it as a ghost story, others as a cautionary tale about sin and punishment, and still others as proof that the world was filled with forces far beyond science. The more the tale spread, the less it belonged to the Chase family, and the more it belonged to the world. For the people of Barbados, the Chase vault changed something deeper than their fears. It altered their view of death itself. Graves were meant to be places of peace, finality, and silence. But now, the very idea of the grave was shaken. If coffins could move in the sealed stone dark, if the dead could not be contained even by lead
and marble, then what safety was there for anyone? It was not just the Chase family who were cursed. It was the island.
The living could not protect their dead, and perhaps could not protect themselves. Soon the Chase vault would become more than a local haunting. Writers, priests, and scientists alike would wrestle with its implications. Some would search for natural explanations, desperate to keep their faith in reason intact. Others would embrace it as proof of the supernatural. But for the simple people of Barbados, the story was less complicated. The coffins had moved. They had seen it. The governor had seen it, and that was all they needed to know. So the Chase vault stood abandoned, but never forgotten. A scar in the earth, sealed in silence, yet still whispering through the island winds. And even today, 2 centuries later, the name of that tomb carries a chill. Not because of what it holds, but because of what it refused to hold. Why did the Chase vault strike such terror into the hearts of the people of Barbados and beyond? After all, death was no stranger to the 18th century. Families buried infants, children, parents, grandparents. Epidemics swept through villages without warning. Murder, piracy, slavery, starvation, these were everyday realities. So why did coffins shifting in the dark send a deeper chill than even the horrors of daily life? The answer lies not in the violence of the vault, but in what it represented. Death, to most, was supposed to be final. A coffin placed in the earth was meant to stay where it was set. It was order in the face of chaos, ritual against despair, but the Chase vault shattered that certainty. If the dead could not be trusted to stay still, then death itself had lost its boundary. The rules that made the world understandable had broken, and the unknown had taken its place. From Europe to Africa to the Caribbean, every culture has feared one thing above all: the dead who do not rest. The vampire, the revenant, the duppy, the hungry ghost. These were not monsters of fantasy, but embodiments of a terror older than language itself. That the grave is not the end, and that the dead may return not as protectors, but as predators. In the Chase vault, the fear was not abstract, it was physical, real. Coffins smashed against walls, lead boxes hurled like feathers, proof that something beyond the living had stirred. Psychologists today might call it cognitive dissonance, when the evidence before your eyes collides with everything you believe to be true. Villagers saw coffins in chaos, yet the cement seal unbroken. They saw lead coffins hurled, yet no footprints in the sand. Their minds searched for explanations, but none would fit. And when the mind cannot explain, the imagination takes over, and the imagination is always crueler than the truth. This was not the first time history had been shaken by the impossible. In 1518, Strasbourg had been gripped by the dancing plague when hundreds of people danced, uncontrollably, for weeks until their deaths. In Salem, women were accused of witchcraft for unexplained fits and visions. In Europe, tales of corpses rising in their graves led to entire villages staking bodies through the heart. The Chase Vault was another of these ruptures, a place where reason fell silent and humanity was forced to face the raw, ancient terror that the world is not what it seems, and that is why, even today, the Chase Vault still disturbs us, because it is not just a story of a family tomb, it is a reminder of how fragile our sense of safety truly is. We want to believe that walls, locks, coffins and rituals will hold death in its place, that we can draw a line between the living and the dead, but the Chase Vault laughed at that line. And in doing so, it touched something deeper than logic. It touched the human need to feel that the world is orderly, that the ground beneath us is firm, that the silence of the grave is absolute. In Barbados, that silence was broken, and once broken, it could never fully be restored. The coffins shifted not just in stone, but in the minds of all who heard the story. And centuries later, we are still unsettled, not by what we know, but by what we cannot explain. Centuries have passed since the Chase Vault was abandoned, yet the mystery has never faded. Historians, scientists, and paranormal researchers have all tried to explain how sealed coffins could shift violently in the dark. Some answers are simple. Some are supernatural. None are satisfying. First came the geologists. Barbados lies in the Lesser Antilles near the edge of a tectonic plate. Could tremors have shaken the vault? At first, the idea made sense, but a closer look revealed problems. Earthquakes leave signs, cracked stones, tilted walls, broken ground, yet the vault itself showed no damage. The cemetery around it was untouched, and tremors, even strong ones, could not toss lead coffins across a chamber like rag dolls. This earthquake theory crumbled under its own weight. Others suggested water. Barbados is an island. Heavy rains and floods were common. Perhaps water seeped into the vault, lifting the coffins so they drifted and collided. But again, the evidence failed. The vault was inspected many times. No standing water was ever found. And even if it had been, the heaviest coffins, made of solid lead, would never float. If water was at work, it was a tide that defied physics. Some scientists proposed that gases trapped within the sealed vault, heated by the tropical sun, might expand and force the coffins to shift, but could hot air really lift and throw hundreds of pounds of lead? Even the boldest defenders of the idea admit it seems absurd. The physics does not hold, and the violence of the displacements, coffins smashed, overturned, slammed against walls, spoke of a force far greater than air. Then there were the skeptics. They claimed it was nothing more than vandalism, clever intruders sneaking into the vault at night to rearrange the coffins and fuel superstition. But this, too, falters. Each time the vault was sealed with cement. Once, sand was spread across the floor to catch footprints. Guards were stationed, yet the vault still opened to chaos and the sand remained untouched. If it was a trick, it was perfect. Too perfect to be human, and so, inevitably, the explanations turned to the supernatural. Some claimed the Chase family was cursed, their bloodline punished for cruelty and abuse. Others whispered of Obeah, the island's forbidden spiritual practice, saying spirits had been summoned to torment the family even in death. Modern paranormal investigators speak of poltergeists, forces that thrive on chaos, feeding on fear, moving objects in violent bursts of energy. To them, the Chase Vault is not a mystery of physics, but of restless spirits trapped within stone. But whether earthquake, flood, prank, or ghost, each theory carries the same flaw. It does not explain everything. Why were only the Chase Vault coffins disturbed while others in the same cemetery lay untouched? Why did the chaos happen again and again in the presence of priests, masons, even the governor himself? And why, after the coffins were removed, did the vault fall silent forever? Whatever force had moved within, it stopped once there was nothing left to move. Theories abound, explanations multiply, but the Chase Vault resists them all. Perhaps it was science we do not yet understand. Perhaps it was mischief lost to time. Or perhaps, as the people of Barbados believed, it was proof that some dead do not rest, and some mysteries do not die. The truth is buried, not beneath the sand
of the vault,
but within the silence of history itself. The Chase Vault stands today in Christ Church Parish, Barbados. Its stone walls are weathered, its marble slab still in place. But inside, it is empty. No coffins, no bodies, no restless weight of lead and wood. And yet, when people walk past its gates, they still lower their voices. Some glance at the ground, others cross themselves. For though the vault holds nothing now, its silence still whispers. In Barbados, the story is passed down like a warning. Parents tell their children never to play near the cemetery. Locals claim that if you stand too close at night, you may hear the scrape of stone against stone, a coffin sliding where no coffin remains. Tourists visit, snapping photographs of the crumbling slab. Guides recount the tale with wide eyes, their voices dropping at the moment they describe the governor's discovery. And always, at the end, they leave the question unanswered. Why? For the Chase Vault is not just a piece of stone. It is a scar, one the island has chosen not to heal. Beyond the Caribbean, the legend of the Chase Vault became part of a larger tapestry of unexplained history. It has been written in books of ghost stories, studied in journals of folklore, debated in the halls of skeptic societies. Some cite it as proof of the supernatural, a rare case where even authority could not deny the impossible. Others dismiss it as hysteria, a tale exaggerated over time. But whether skeptic or believer, all agree on one point. The story endures because it was recorded by so many, witnessed by the highest powers of the island, and never explained. And so the Chase Vault remains a reminder, not just of restless coffins, but of how fragile our trust in certainty can be. We want to believe the world is orderly, that the dead stay buried, that the stone keeps silence, that history is neat and contained. But the Chase Vault broke that illusion. It showed us that sometimes the stone moves, sometimes the silence cracks, and sometimes the questions are louder than the answers. Perhaps the vault was cursed. Perhaps it was science we have not yet discovered. Or perhaps the truth is darker. Still, that the dead themselves refuse to be forgotten. The Chase Vault has been empty for over 2 centuries, but its story remains full of fear, of wonder, of whispers carried on the Caribbean wind. And when you think of it tonight, in the silence of your own room, ask yourself, if coffins can move in the dark, what else might stir when no one is watching? If this mystery has haunted you, tell us in the comments. What do you believe happened in the Chase Vault? Was it science, superstition, or something far stranger? And don't forget to subscribe to Cold Mysteries, where every week we open another locked door of history, another tale the world has tried to bury, because the past is never as silent as we think. Some vaults never close,